Well, good morning, and a pleasant good Thursday. It's early afternoon. I beg your pardon. I've been up since so early for so long today that I can't even remember morning from afternoon right now. I was on like one of these things with the CW network today where we're promoting starting Atlantic Coast Conference basketball coverage this weekend. We have a doubleheader, Syracuse, Notre Dame, and then I'm doing Virginia against SMU. And so they call it this media blitz, where I was on with a different channel CW station in like 15 different cities, back to back to back to back to back. And so I'm glad we're back here in safe territory, and we welcome you to Dialed In. I'm Tom Brenneman, joined by Luke Brenneman. How are you, young man, at Indiana University?
I'm good. It's a little bit chilly here, but it's a huge weekend for sports. I've been looking forward to this show for a long time. I feel like a lot of the better weekends in American sports, especially college sports, everyone focuses on March Madness, and I understand that with the NCAA men's basketball tournament. But conference championship weekend, with the implications that they now have, where it's win and you're
Yep.
in, and a team like Clemson can backdoor the college football playoff. Obviously, Arizona State has a chance to do the same. This is a good time to be a college football fan, arguably the best week of the season. So I'm really looking
All
forward
right,
to this.
fair enough. Okay, and Jacob is our producer today rather than Casey. Jacob Tissett, how are you, my man?
It's good. Always a good day when I get to join the Brenneman boys on Dialed In. So excited to be here. Happy to be here. I know What's the Move comes later in the show, but I was supposed to be having a fun conference championship weekend. I had tickets for Indianapolis, but my
Yeah.
Buckeyes decided they didn't want to go, so I'm not going either.
Yep. We'll get all that straight ahead. Our show is presented by UDF and Encore Technologies. As you know, we come your way twice a week, live on Mondays, a little after 9 o'clock on Chatterbox Sports. We post a little bit later in the day on the Believe Network, and then we come your way Thursdays at noon, as we are today. You can find us on the YouTube/Chatterbox Sports page. You can download us anytime, anywhere. Just search Dialed In with Tom Brenneman, and you're dialed in. Now, we know the Bengals don't play until Monday night in Dallas, so we're not spending a lot of time on the Bengals today, a little bit. We can do a lot of that on Monday morning. There is a good one tonight in the NFL. Inside of the NFC North, you have the Lions hosting the Green Bay Packers. Detroit is so beat up. It's unbelievable how many players they have hurt, and they just keep on keeping on. I think this is a big game for Jordan Love. I know he's very early in his career. Last year, his first year as a full-time starter. But can he win on the road against a good team in prime time? We will also break out our Power 5 NFL teams in the NFL coming up shortly. Now, as Luke mentioned, college football takes center stage. Championship games played in every conference. Results of those games will dramatically affect, in some cases, who's in and who's out of the college football playoff. We're going to pick some of those games coming up shortly. But you see, Jacob has his 3-loss Alabama jersey on today. Is Alabama going to get in over a 2-loss Miami team? Well, that's where we are right now. And look, if Penn State loses to Oregon, now they say they're not going to penalize teams who are playing one more game. But if you're looking at the seedings, if Penn State were to lose to Oregon, and let's say they get knocked off and it's pretty handy in Oregon's favor, are the Nittany Lions, who lost at home to Ohio State, going to be ahead of the Buckeyes in the playoff seedings? There's no way, right? No chance, right? Apparently
Has
there's a
to
chance.
be.
We'll discuss this. And then in baseball, the Juan Soto free agency stakes continue to climb. Word has it that his deal could reach upwards of over $600 million. I say good for him. I have no issue ever with anyone making as much money as they possibly can. I'm all in favor of it. But everything that ills baseball are situations just like this. Because unlike the NFL or the NBA or the NHL, where you have a salary cap, there are no more 5 teams, 7 maybe, that can even think about signing Soto. For most of the others, complete pipe dream. Not even a pipe dream. Zero chance. And is any player really worth over $500 million? I mean, for real now. The only guy that I can make a case argument maybe is Shohei because of his international appeal. $600 million, no. One guy's not going to bring you that much. But that's just my opinion. We'll get to all that later. All right, fellas, where do you want to start? Let's start in college football. No, you know what? Because we're going to spend very little time in the NFL. Any early thoughts about the Bengals and Cowboys and some of the stuff going on? Next week, I do want to get into some of the questions about what should the Bengals do the rest of this season, meaning do they consider sitting down Joe Burrow? Do they consider sitting down Jamar Chase? Do they consider bringing him back next year? That's a slam dunk that they're not going to bring him back next year. But what do you guys think?
You cut out there for a second, but I heard the start of it when you bring up Burrow. I don't think you do. I think you always play to win in a league like the NFL. There's obviously strategy involved.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing when you look at this season from a decision-making standpoint is you should have paid Jamar when he wanted to get paid. He's that good of a player. He's that elite. And if he wants his bag a year early, then give him his bag, because now you're not just giving him a duffel, you're giving him the entire vault. He has every argument to be the highest paid receiver in NFL over Jefferson now.
Yeah.
I would make the case that he was already better than Jefferson, but the numbers were the numbers, and Jettis was winning the Vikings football games. I mean, both of those guys, these LSU products, they deserve the money. Now, there's always that argument. I mean, certain teams, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they didn't pay Tyreek Hill. They kept a tight end in Kelsey, but they're still a 10-win football team with a first-round draft pick receiver. Rice is injured, and he was like their blossoming number one. So maybe there's an argument where if you have a quarterback as good as Joe Burrow, you kind of can elevate receivers by throwing them open. But a guy like Jamar Chase, I think, looking back, I would have loved to see him get paid. He's going to get paid. But where else is the money going to go? Because we all know the defense needs some new pieces, and that costs a lot, especially when you're looking at an edge rusher, a lockdown corner. So the Bengals are going to have to be perfect, as the offseason almost feels like it's pretty much starting right now, where you got to draft well. This is something they haven't done. You have to be good, because the Joe Burrow window, it's wide open right now. He's paid. You have him for a decade, but it's just a season like this with the injury last year, and now you're a 4-win football team. I mean, this is pathetic right now for what's going on in Cincinnati. So as that window gets a little bit towards, it's not anything to panic about, but they need to be precise in their moves.
I disagree. I think it is time to panic a little bit. I mean, you're already now 5 years into it, and 2 of the 5 he's been hurt for the season, knocked out for the year, a knee injury, and then the wrist injury last year. You've gotten 3 seasons out of 5. So let's just you hope and pray this isn't true. But let's say over the next 5, you get 3 healthy seasons out of Burrow. I think you're starting to get close to panic time. And the question I have, Jacob, I'd be interested in your hearing this, your opinion on this, because you're an avid Bengal guy, just like Luke and just like Casey. They have proven when they have, say, the top 3, 4, 5 picks in a draft that they're really good. They don't miss. And most recently, that'd be the duo of Chase and Burrow. Would you rather see them lose games to have a higher pick, or do you keep playing and you keep playing, you keep trying to win, which is the nature of every single athlete out there, and trust that the Bengals can get a pick right somewhere in the middle of the pack?
Personally, I would prefer to lose. And I know that's not the best thing to say as a fan or as someone that's supposed to be supporting the team or someone that has a live stream show for him every single week. So maybe I shouldn't say I want him to lose. But at this point, looking at this draft class, I think the top of it is so good. And the top players at the positions the Bengals need are elite and day one influence guys. And if the Bengals can be picking in the top 8 to 10, I think they can get one of those guys with an immediate impact. I think if you get further down in that 15 to 18 range, you're talking about development again. And what have we seen with the Bengals when they get those guys that are good players falling down draft boards needing developed? They've been unable to do it. They haven't been able to develop under this regime. So I don't know what the right answer is, at least right now for me, with this as a lost season. I'm looking forward, and I'm kind of with you in terms of panic, Tom. I think there is reason to be concerned about the long-term success of this team. I mean, you had a 2-year window where you were in the Super Bowl and then in the AFC Championship, and I think all of us Bengals fans just immediately thought, oh, we're going to be here every year. The season goes through January now. That's just how Bengals fans operate. But obviously now the last 2 years going how they've gone, that's not the case, and the Bengals are going to have to operate in a new way in order to get back to that position, and we're going to have to see if they're willing to do that. But I think one way that they can get through it kind of the way that they've been operating is if they lose some of these games and pick higher, because you're just going to get a good player that falls to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's look, nobody likes having these questions. And Luke, you said it best a minute ago. I mean, we're not even 2.5 months removed from talking about this team having to make a run at the Super Bowl. And I mean, here we are, and it's 4-8 and going nowhere fast. If they did win their last 5, there would be conceivably a chance to get in the postseason at 9-8. But nobody believes this team's capable of winning 5 in a row here to end the year. Nobody's believing that. We mentioned a good game tonight between the Lions, who look like the best team in football. We're going to give you our Power 5 here in a few minutes from each of us. But tonight, there are 3 good teams inside that NFC North. Minnesota, certainly the biggest surprise of all of them. I don't think anybody's surprised that Detroit is winning games because they made a big run last year in the postseason. And then there's Green Bay, another team that reached a postseason last year. And so all 3 of those teams, if the season ended right now, would be in the playoffs. Being a divisional champion is a big deal. So this is a big game tonight. Luke, your thoughts on this one, because everybody in the chat wants to know Brenny's lock of the night or lock of the weekend.
I don't think it's going to come in this game because of how competitive it's going to be. I remember when we picked this game on the show the first time around. Correct me if I'm wrong. The game is in Detroit tonight?
Correct.
Okay. So when we picked it the first time around, I remember going with the Packers because I said I like the home team. Typically, I'll go with the better quarterback and the home team in these super competitive, especially divisional matchups. I think because I picked the Pack the first time around, there's no reason to not pick them. And honestly, if we just want to jump into our power rankings now, I'd be more than happy to go first.
All right, go ahead.
The graphics fired up. I have the Packers as the top 5 team in football. I have them over what some people would put the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of people are putting the Steelers now inside of the top 5 after their offense, proved themselves against the Bengals' daycare defense. And Detroit's the best team in football. Buffalo is right there behind them, and they're coming. But Detroit hasn't had that slip-up. They almost did on Thanksgiving against the Bears, which would have been a bad loss, not the end of the world for the sake of their season. But they continue to hold on and win games. I love the Bills as a big Super Bowl contender. But the Eagles, I have them sneaking into my top 3 instead of the Chiefs because the Chiefs, yes, they're winning games. Yes, they're a 10-win team. But we all know they're escaping, and I'm not going to be the person to discredit the Chiefs for escaping. But the Eagles, to get that win the way they got it in a gritty fashion against Baltimore, I have to, catapult them and propel them into my top 3. So Lions, Bills, Eagles, Chiefs, Packers. My honorable mention will be the Pittsburgh Steelers. But nonetheless, when you're looking at Super Bowl caliber teams, I really do think all 5 of these are my 5 Super Bowl contenders. I draw the line at 5 with the Packers. I still am not sold on the Steelers' offense. They beat up on the Bengals, who we know how the defense is. And I'm really not sold on the Vikings. And I think that's a surprise to a lot of people and definitely worthy of an argument. But as of right now, those 5 teams, they all have really talented quarterbacks, and I love that about them.
Well, I don't see Green Bay remotely close to being a Super Bowl contending team. There's no way Green Bay, in my opinion, is going to go on the road in the playoffs and beat the Lions, beat the Eagles on the road. I don't see it happening, and I'm wrong a lot more than right. So I don't want to make it sit here and seem like it's a gospel here. But my Power 5, and look, Luke mentioned it. The one team where we have we've got the order a little bit stacked. Philadelphia's won 8 in a row. I mean, they're beating the snot out of everybody. They started the year 2-2, and they were talking about firing their coach here in Philadelphia and Sirianni. And now they're 10-2. We know what the Lions are. Buffalo's look great. I mean, man, have they look good. Kansas City, end of the day, they've lost 1 game. So it's hard to believe we're putting them fourth because they have the fewest number of losses of most of that group. And then the Steelers, I don't know how you leave them out. I mean, I know they got fat off a bad Bengals, to borrow your term, Lukey, daycare defense. That probably ought to stick along with like doomsday defense, daycare defense. I mean, Russell Wilson is still a good quarterback, man. He may not be among the top, 7, 8 guys, but he's still solid. You can win with him. They can run the ball. They play great defense. They didn't have Highsmith last week. I know the Bengals put some points on the board against him, but the Bengals put points on the board against everybody. Nobody can slow down the Bengals. At the end of the day, they're scoring 30 or more most of the time and getting beat. So, Jacob, how about you? You got a top 5 or did you do a power 5?
I have a top 5, and it's the same teams as Luke, but a big difference from the two of yours. I love the Lions. I think the Lions are playing great football. I think they're probably the best team in football right now, and everyone's pointing to it. I'm not picking against Philadelphia in the NFC. I think they have a better quarterback, an equal run game, which is what you hang your hat on with the Detroit Lions. I think Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are just as good as Saquon Barkley, but I think that's about a wash. And then I certainly give the credit to the weapons on the outside for Philadelphia. Their defense is playing out of this world right now. Detroit is banged up. DJ Reader not playing tonight. I think those injuries are going to catch up to Detroit at some point. I think Philadelphia and Buffalo are the two best teams in football right now, with Detroit as a very, very close third. Have to credit Kansas City. And then I'm a Jordan Love believer as well. I have Green Bay at 5, just like Luke did.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Connor points out in the chat, and we talked about it in the monologue, is that Detroit, I guess, they're playing 4 backup or reserve defensive linemen in that game tonight. But you know what? Dan Campbell and his staff, they've been dealing with injuries all year long. They just find a way to get guys to show up and start playing. And they're at home. So there's no way I'm picking against them tonight. All right, now we get to the college. Anything else on the pro game you fellas want to talk about? Or are we getting right into college football now?
I say we jump into college football.
Good with me.
Okay. When the rankings came out the other night, look, there are 4 or 5 schools which have every right in the world to be irate at where they sit in all this. Miami certainly is one. They've lost 2 games by a total of 9 points this season. Now they've lost 2 of their last 4. And they were knocked out of the ACC championship game with that loss last Saturday against Syracuse, at Syracuse, and Kyle McCord. They're behind Alabama. Your guys, Jacob Tissett, as an Alabama alum. Okay, this time a year ago, you were sitting around there in Tuscaloosa as the film guy for Nick Saban.
Yes, sir.
Look, I understand the whole scheduling thing. I get all that. But when you've had a couple of losses like Alabama has had this year, I just find it really hard to believe that they were able to leapfrog Miami. I don't buy into the Ole Miss thing. They lost to 2 bad teams. So I'm not falling prey to the whole Lane Kiffin thing. Statistically, they are a team that would be the analytical darling because they're a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense. But they find a way to lose 3 games during the season. But anyway, did you guys have anything that stood out for you about the college football playoff rankings? Anything that really bothered you, you liked, you didn't like? Luke, I'll start with you.
No, and I'm going to try and do the best that I can to simplify this. I think it's pretty straightforward now. So you have the 1 and 2 seeds, buys and everything. I think it's winner of Big Ten and winner of SEC. Doesn't matter. Then 3 and 4, it's going to work itself out, whether it's, who comes out of the Big 12 or ACC. But at this point, it's extremely straightforward who's going to get in and who's not from a seeding perspective. I mean, I think 5 and 6 interchangeably is the losers of Big Ten and SEC championship game. Then at 7, you're going to have Notre Dame and Ohio State at 7 and 8 flip-flopped. And then that's when it gets tricky because you're looking at 9, which I think Tennessee is pretty locked into that spot. And then Indiana probably at 10 because they're certainly in the playoff, but don't have any reason to probably climb up the ladder of a seed or host a game. And those final spots are going to come down to it. Looks like Alabama's going to make it. It really does. An 86% chance to make the playoff is what ESPN has. I know they're not always accurate, but these conference championships are going to be interesting now to look at who is a threat to win the whole thing. Indiana is a 99% chance to get in the playoff, but they haven't really shown anyone that they can compete with a top 10 team in the country because they got embarrassed in Columbus. Notre Dame, I think that they might win the national title, but I don't have an argument to make against anybody because they got one good win in the first week of the season on the road. I don't want to take that away from them because I'm extremely high on Coach Freeman's squad, but they're going to host a game. That's a tough place to go win a game in December. So it is straightforward. The ACC championship game determines a lot because you're looking at Clemson stealing a seed, which would bump everybody back and probably throw Alabama out. But the 5 through 9, 5 through 10, I would say those are all locked in. And Miami is not making the college football playoff. So that argument's out the window. Ole Miss is not sneaking in, and I certainly don't think that South Carolina is making the playoff at all because they have a head-to-head loss against Alabama.
Yeah, no chance.
Ward Manuel basically said as much.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, the interesting questions, Jacob, are going to be, or that I think anyway, is if Clemson were to win the Atlantic Coast Conference title game against SMU, SMU's only losses this year, they're 2 losses because they've only lost 1 game. They did not lose in the conference. They lost a 2-point game against BYU early in the year when BYU was rolling. I mean, BYU was undefeated the first 9 weeks of this season. So they lost to, at the time, a top 15 team. And they would be, if they lost this weekend, they would lose to Clemson, a borderline top 15 team. And so Clemson would get in. But would it be SMU that would knock out Alabama, a 2-loss SMU team, or over a 3-loss Alabama team? To start with that game specifically, that scenario right there. Jacob, what do you think happens there? Does Alabama go before SMU or SMU knocked out?
Yeah, I think Alabama's in the playoff. I think if SMU wins, it's very simple. Clemson's out. Yeah. They're already behind Alabama. I think if Clemson wins, I think Alabama's in the playoff and SMU's sitting at home. I don't think you can play a 12-week schedule and lose your 2 ranked games and still just think, hey, we did it in the ACC without playing any of their hard teams. We get to go to the playoff. I don't think the committee's going to do that. If they had slated Miami over Alabama, I would have said absolutely SMU's going to stay up there. But they made it very clear that these ranked wins and strength of schedule matters immensely. And SMU just doesn't have that unless they win the ACC. I'm not a proponent of the conference championship loss shouldn't hurt you camp. I think it absolutely should. I think it should be able to drop you down and drop you out. And in all honesty, I think we should be having a very similar conversation about Penn State, not dropping them out of the playoffs, but seriously dropping them seeding-wise if they were to lose to Oregon. Those are the only 2 really difficult games that they've played on their schedule. Texas has removed themselves from that conversation with the win at Texas A&M. They have a little bit more going for them if they're able to beat Georgia or even lose a second time to Georgia. They're locked in at least hosting a game. But I think the Penn State discussion is much closer to SMU than a lot of people want to admit. But just sticking on the ACC championship, in my opinion, obviously a little biased. I went to Alabama, worked for the team, but I think Alabama's going to be in regardless of how that ACC championship goes, whether people like it or not.
Okay. Well, you bring up, and I had brought up as well, this whole Penn State thing. Look, the committee allegedly, and I don't know what happens when they get behind closed doors at that big conference center where they hang out outside of Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Okay. I don't know what they do. I don't know what it's like in there. I'd love to just be on the fly on the wall. Not to report it for shows like this or on television, just to see what it's really like. Because we never get a straight answer about what it really is. One thing we've heard through the years is they try not to put too much stock in the big rivalry games because there is a lot of emotion. It's different than just playing some other conference team. Okay, and I only bring that up because of the Ohio State 4th straight year losing to Michigan, okay? And so when you look at if Penn State were to lose by double digits this Saturday to Oregon, and I think they will because they can't score like Oregon. They've got a good defense, but Ohio State has a great defense and gave up points to Oregon, and Ohio State lost that game by 1 point in Eugene. Now, if Penn State loses this game by double figures, there is no way on God's earth that you're going to put more importance if both teams have two losses, two teams being Ohio State and Penn State. There is no way on God's earth that you are going to put more stock in Penn State losing two games, but they didn't lose to Michigan, and then not including if both have two losses, what happens when they met head-to-head? Ohio State beat Penn State on Penn State's home field. And you might be saying, well, who cares? You're both going to get in. That could be the difference between being the 7 or 8 seed in this whole thing as opposed to being the 5 seed in this whole thing. And there is a night and day difference on who you play in the first game and who you might play in the second game as that number 5 seed as opposed to being the 6, 7, or 8 seed. If you're the 8 seed, if you win your game against a good number 9 seeded team, and in the latest playoff rankings, that would be Ohio State hosting Tennessee. Ohio State would have to play Oregon their next game. If you get to the 5 seed, you'd play Arizona State right now in the playoff opening round game at home. And then you would probably play Boise State the next round. Now you tell me, who you want to play? Arizona State and Boise State, or do you want to play Tennessee and Oregon? There's no way this committee will put Penn State ahead of Ohio State in the rankings if Penn State gets drilled by Oregon this weekend. Luke, I think you disagree with that.
Could not disagree more. As crazy as it may sound, the head-to-head stuff, it matters. That is king, and it's going to win you every single argument. But
well, if it's head-to-head, then why are you picking? If it's head-to-head, then why would you pick Penn State over Ohio State?
Let me
finish
beat them
here on their home field.
I understand that, but Penn State avoided losing when they were 21-point underdogs or 21-point favorites all season long on their home field. They lost to Ohio State with no offense whatsoever in that game by 7 points at home. I understand the argument. And you're probably going to win this argument in the terms of one-on-one right back and forth. You have a better case. But Penn State will be a higher seed when it's all said and done, no matter what may happen, in my opinion, in Indianapolis. You cannot punish a team in Penn State for making the Big Ten championship game and showing up to play in a game that Ohio State literally blew their chances as 21-point favorites against their arch rival and turned the ball over numerous times, didn't even generate offense, lost to a quarterback that threw for sub 80 yards. That loss on its own completely discredits that argument. And it's a fair argument. If they're both two lost teams and one has beaten the other, it's like, hey, I'm going to put that team over the other. But in the grand scheme of things, this is a long season, and that loss is a lot more of a stain on Ohio State than a Big Ten championship blowout could be for Penn State. That's unfair.
Well, the other part of that you got to keep in mind here now is, okay, Penn State will have played 2 games this year against top 10 opponents. They'd be 0-2. Right. One of the losses at home. Ohio State has played 3 top 5 teams. 3 of them this year. They're 2-1. And the only loss was a 1-point loss to the only undefeated team in the country on that team's home field. I think that and the head-to-head are going to be the difference between Ohio State getting a better seed when all is said and done than Penn State. Jacob, you with me on that, or you with Luke on this?
I kind of toe the line here. I think Luke's...
Oh, come on. Well, good Lord.
I agree with your take. I just don't think it's going to happen.
What the hell is that?
I think Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Penn State. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to do it. I think they're going to try to put as much weight in these conference championship games as possible. With both teams playing in it already being in, they lose a lot of that shine anyway, at least in most of these cases. So to punish the losing team in those games, teams would not want to go anymore. And I think that's the conversation around SMU. If they lose to Clemson, why not have COVID pop up in the facility and not play this week? You're in the playoff. That's what their head coach said. And it's a great point. So I think the committee is going to try to protect the sanctity of these conference championship games, protect the illusion that it's a benefit to play in and win these games, because I think the 5th seed is far and above better than the number 1 seed in this playoff format. So until there's changes to the format, I think they're going to do everything they can to keep these conference championship games significant, and part of that is not punishing the loser. I think that's what's going to, not allow this to happen. But I absolutely think Ohio State should be above Penn State with a loss to Oregon, and I'm not even going to go as far as to say a blowout. I think if they lose to Oregon, Ohio State should be ahead of them. So I certainly agree with you, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Well, they're going to have to make changes in this the way they set it up. And they've been talking about doing this in the NFL for a long time, but they haven't done it. But in college football, they're quicker to change. They have this 12-team deal now. They're already talking about a 16-team deal in the not-too-distant future. But I think that they will readdress this, because there's no way anybody in their right mind, nobody in their right mind can say that an Arizona State or a Boise State, or a normal year in the Big 12, or really outside of a year or two here or there by Clemson in the ACC, there's really no way that you can be putting those teams as a first-round bye in a top 4 seed, even though they're conference champions. The bottom line is they're getting in the playoff. That's the bottom line. A conference champion last year, Florida State, they didn't lose a game all year long. Their quarterback got hurt, so they get bumped. But, something like that's never going to happen again. But they should not have a first-round bye and a number 3 or a number, a team getting an 8 or 9 seed instead of a 4 seed. Okay, Luke, let's get to the picks. You're the man who runs this. Here we go. Let's go.
All right, here we go. It's been a while since we've done the pick'em. Jacob, do we have the standings updated? If not, I can just read them out.
I think they're updated.
Okay, well, I have myself in the lead at 51 wins. Yes, that's perfect.
Oh, boy, it's tired.
Coming off 6 of 7 2 weeks ago. I mean, I am running away and hiding. But, hey, this is a perfect week for not only my dad to get back atop the leaderboard, but Casey maybe to make some ground, because we still have a couple more weeks left. We have all of bowl season. We have the NFL playoffs that are still not until the new year. So plenty of good games to pick. We're picking a whopping 6 football games. Go bang, bang. We can take some time for the bigger ones, but let's start early in the week. Mountain West Championship. It's UNLV versus Boise State. I think a lot of people could have predicted this game as the championship to determine a playoff spot maybe, months ago? This is really like at the start of the year. UNLV was ranked. Boise State's been riding their workhorse in Genty, and they're 4-point favorites. So I'm cutting out. I'll let Jacob take it away for your pick.
All right. Well, I saw you. Go ahead, Jacob. You go first.
All right. This is a tough one. I think it's 2 really good teams. Boise State obviously has to win this one in order to have a chance at getting in. But I'm going with UNLV. I think UNLV is playing really good football right now. Ever since they made the quarterback change, they've been looking a lot better. So I'm going with UNLV.
I had UNLV this season when they made that quarterback change, and they've got a nice team. I mean, they granted they had the whatever it was overtime loss against Syracuse this year, 44-41. If you take that one out, they have had an incredible year, and they have got a lot of good players, and that's a program that's going to be heard from for many, many, many years to come, because they've got a heck of a coach out there. But I got to tell you, I think at the end of the day, I think Boise's just having one of those years. So I think that Boise State comes out on top in this game and wins the game outright. Not just covers, but wins the game outright.
Well, they are 4-point favorites, so that would have to happen. I I have UNLV. I think it's a case of one of those seasons where, like you said, you mentioned Boise. We thought it was Boise. They have all the hype. Obviously, Genty a chance to win the Heisman Trophy, and nobody's talking about the dark horse. And somebody left the back door unlocked, and the Rebels are going to sneak into the college football playoff. I really think it's going to happen. 4-point dogs win outright. Book it with the Rebels from Vegas.
To get into the playoff, how are they going to get into the playoff? Wouldn't it be Tulane Army?
Oh boy,
yes, it would.
Is that accurate? So
I thought Army
well,
was
I think with Tulane's loss last week, they really hurt themselves in this
That's
thing.
definitely
but it would
true.
be. That's right.
It would be
no,
way closer.
Tulane's done. I think it really would be UNLV.
Okay.
Yeah, it would.
All right.
I would argue that it's probably a 60% chance that they get in. So better than a coin toss.
So Mountain West Championship's a play-in game.
Basically, I think is right.
I've thought that all week.
That
yes, I wonder what the chat thinks, but I totally
Yeah.
think it is a playing game. Yes.
Yes, it is. It is. Sean Spurlock has just confirmed if UNLV were to win that game, the Rebels would be in the playoff. And trust me, boys and girls, they got a good team.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, you've seen them. All right, let's move on. We have plenty more games to pick. This one is definitely going to spark the interest of a lot of our viewership, especially the host of our show, the MAC Championship.
Oh, boy.
Ohio versus Miami of Ohio. I love this. In-state rivalry in the championship game. This is like as good as it gets. And I'm here to spoil the party, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Red Hawk win. Miami is going to be the Mid-American Conference Championships. They're one of the hottest teams in football right now. They're on a huge winning streak. They're very well coached. And Ohio's had a heck of a year. They moved on from Curtis Rourke, who my Indiana Hoosiers have, very much appreciated. We love Curtis Rourke. He's a Heisman contender. But Ohio, they're not MAC champs this year. It's the Red Hawks.
All right, Jacob, what about you?
Sorry, Tom. I'm doing it too. I was all in on Miami before the season to win the MAC and potentially even make a playoff push. Obviously, they started the season pretty slow. That's not going to be the case. But certainly putting it together lately, I think they're going to do enough to cover and win this game.
Well, let me say ahead of time that as an Ohio U grad can say anything good about Miami, I love Chuck Martin, and I don't think he's going to be there much longer unless he's just happy there in Oxford. I think this guy's ready to take over a big-time program because he is a big-time coach. I'm a little worried he might have OU's number because OU beat them like a drum for about a decade plus, maybe longer than that, and now they've lost 2 in a row, including this year. But, boys, you might be able to get by the Bobcats once in a single season. You are never getting past the Bobcats twice in a season. Go Bobcats! Here we go!
All right, let's move on to the
Talking
big boys
about
now.
a difference, Luke, as a college student, and Jacob, you ought to appreciate, it's a difference between those that drink high noons and those that drink beer. Okay? You can't root for the high noon crowd, and you two clowns just pick them.
If you would have put it that way, I would have went with OU.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well,
That's
never mind.
honestly
Too late
true.
now. High nooners.
That's a good point. I mean, someone's got to clip that. The Miami crowd won't love that, the White Claw crowd.
Too bad.
The Big 12 is absolutely a beer conference. Both of these schools, though,
Yeah.
kind of this is kind of a White Claw Busch Light matchup as well. Nonetheless, Big 12 winning your in game, massive implications on the line, and Arizona State is 2-point favorites in this one. I love the Big 12. I love the realignment. I think it's going to continue to get better. And I think people aren't talking about just how competitive of a conference this was this season, week in and week out. You had a TCU team who's a late bloomer that, they're not even in remote talks to be a playoff team, but they are maybe a top 25 team the way they've played, and no one's talking about them. BYU fell all the way off. And then you have the big dogs up top, Colorado, Iowa State, Arizona State, and we're down to 2. I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes with Iowa State, or excuse me, the Cyclones, not U of I. But I like Iowa State. They're a really good team, and everyone's talking about Kenny Dillingham and this Arizona squad. They're looking solid, but I'm flipping my pick. I originally had Arizona State, and I have to take Iowa State in this one as 2-point underdogs.
It'll be a cold day in hell before I bet against Kenny Dillingham. I'm taking Arizona State. Love what he's doing in Tempe. I think he's doing really, really special stuff. The press conference, his opening press conference, where he sat there and he said, we need everyone in this valley to get behind us, because if you get behind me, I'm going to bring us a championship. That's been going everywhere now, and I think he finally does get him that championship this week, and I think they take care of Iowa State and head on to the playoffs. And man, can you imagine that campus with a playoff game?
Oh,
that's going to be crazy.
Oh,
that's going to be crazy.
It would be absolutely insane. I'm surprised Luke picked against Arizona State. He's an Arizona-born young man. I'm very, very surprised he's picked against his original home state team. But I'm going with the Iowa State Hawkeyes. Cyclones. Here we go. Iowa State. I'm going with them.
I almost want to flip my pick now. The SEC, Georgia v. Texas. I think this is the best conference championship game. The picks are already up there. I'm a hook 'em horns guy. I really am. Everyone wanted to call Texas like a fraud all season because they didn't have that marquee win. You can chuck that out the door. This is a really good team. Everyone talks about Ewers, the Manning duo. The wide receivers are really quick and talented. I just love how physical they are. They're well coached. They can spread it offensively, and boy, they rough you up on the defensive end. I have Texas covering, obviously winning, and Texas is back, and they're here to stay because they're going to be a top 4 seed, maybe the number 2 overall seed with a win in this game.
Yeah, you saw it when I flashed it up there. I'm hooking them horns as well. I think that defense has taken as many steps forward as Carson Beck has taken steps back since they last played each other. So I think it's going to be a mess down in Atlanta. I think Texas is going to win relatively easily. I think the 2.5 is a low number. I think they're going to take care of business in Atlanta. It's going to be funny when Georgia beats Texas in Austin and Texas beats Georgia in Atlanta. Just funny how college football always works out.
Texas has not proven to me yet that they can win the big one. And this might be the year. So I'm not saying that it's not. But Texas has been a borderline fraud. They have not beaten anybody any good all year long. The best team by far they played this entire season was at home, and they got boat raced by Georgia. And they're going to get boat raced by Georgia in the SEC championship game on Saturday. Mark it down.
All right, Big Ten. We love the Big Ten here in the Midwest. Penn State, Oregon. We've talked about it for a while, and for some reason, my dad wants to keep saying that Oregon's going to, blow out Penn State, and I really think they're starting to speak it into existence. I'm with you on this one. I'm going to go with the Ducks and lay 3.5. I've never been a Drew Aller guy. I was supporting Penn State in the argument that they will be higher seeded than Ohio State because you can't punish a team for playing in this game. But to be quite frank, this is kind of a nightmare for James Franklin. You don't get a week off. Yes, you have a chance to win a Big Ten championship and put up a banner at your school, but he doesn't win the big game. Drew Aller doesn't have the talent or stuff to win the big game. This Oregon team is damn good, and they're coming to Indy, and they're ready to show the Big Ten. Dan Lanning is saying, hey, we're here to stay, and they're going to be the first Big Ten champion with a conference realignment.
I absolutely agree. I think Oregon's going to win handedly. This Penn State offense doesn't scare me. They're not going to be able to score with Oregon. Dylan Gabriel's not going to turn the ball over, which is the only thing that kept them in the Ohio State game. I think Oregon's going to roll every single step of the way on Saturday. And scary thing with National Signing Day yesterday and some of the flips that went to Oregon, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. They have the top 2 receivers in this draft class. They have the number 1 quarterback from 2 years ago that transferred in, waiting in the wings behind Dylan Gabriel. They're looking like the next powerhouse in college football. And if Nike's going to keep giving them money, I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
Look, somebody asked me, Blackmore asked in the chat earlier, if Ohio State had beaten Michigan and then lost to Oregon in the championship game, would I put Penn State in over Ohio State? Blackmore, that's the most ridiculous question you've ever asked, because it would mean that Ohio State had 2 losses this season, and they lost both times to the number 1 team in the country. Once on their home field and once on a neutral field. So that's not an apples to apples argument in any form or fashion. And even if you want to say, okay, they both had 2 losses, right, which they would under your scenario, then you go to head. And Ohio State beat Penn State on their home field. Come on, Blackmore, you're better than that. Look, Penn State scored 1 touchdown in the game against Ohio State, and that was on defense. That was a pick 6. There is no way they are going to be able to stay with Oregon in this game. 3.5, in my opinion, is the biggest shocker of any spread I've seen all year long. Oregon can score. They're playing on turf. They're faster. I think Penn State has a very good team, but they are not going to they're not putting up 27 or more, which is what you're going to need to win the game.
Sounds like we're all on the same page there, that whenever you see the full banner as the same on these sports talk shows, typically it's a nightmare for the guys on camera. ACC Championship, let's wrap up college football and get into the 3 good pro games of the week. Clemson versus SMU. All kinds of implications. I'm a Clemson guy. I'm a Dabo guy, not a fan, but I trust good football programs. SMU hasn't proved anything. Dad, you mentioned it. They deserve to be in the spot and conversations that they're in right now. But when push comes to shove, just like I see it in Iowa State, just like I see it in UNLV, everyone wants to talk about this one team that's going to make it. Everyone's just slotting SMU in there. Don't close the door on Clemson because Cade Klubnik, he's blossoming this year. He's ready to win the big one, and I have them winning the ACC championship on Saturday night.
That's big time. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game. Like I said earlier, I think Alabama's going to get in either way. I think the loser of this game is going to be on the outside looking in of the 12-team college football playoff. But to keep it easy on my heart, I'm picking SMU. Let me coast through Saturday, get my Crimson Tide to the playoff, and everyone can be happy.
You know, I really wrestle with this one. I saw SMU early in the year when they, too, made a quarterback change after losing to BYU. And it was a gutsy move made by Lashley, their head coach, because the quarterback who they benched had a great year last year. And they went with a young guy. They've not lost since. I can't even remember who I picked in this game. I might be
Clemson,
changing
but
my
you can
line.
Change it.
I'm going to change it. I'm going with SMU.
Let's go.
Because I disagree with Luke on Klubnik. Good player, really good player. But I had them 2 weeks ago. There's something missing there. There's something missing with that team. I'm not quite sure how to put a finger on it, but I think SMU wins the game, even though the game is in Charlotte, and there are going to be a pile of Clemson fans there. But I think SMU, they're rolling, and I think they win this game. I'm having a hard time with this one, but I'll take the Mustangs.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no denying that Clemson isn't a national title contender if they make the playoff. But I'm always going to pick the Tigers over the little polo pony guys in Dallas. Those guys are frauds. They don't have a single win.
Pony guy. What are you? You're a polo
I'm
guy.
I'm a Hoosier. That's
you
Midwest.
and
That's grit.
Jacob are wearing your
Big Ten.
fancy Lululemon stuff. Both of you clowns. My wife won't buy me a T-shirt, and she buys you a Lululemon jacket.
Hey, that's not my fault. This thing's sweet. Shout out Lululemon. They need to sponsor the show.
That's right.
Jacob's already got his in the
Say hello
mail.
to your son. You bought him that jacket. Say hi there. She won't want to be on. Never mind. Go ahead.
All right, let's go to the pro game. I forgot how good of a Thursday night football game that we have tonight, so we don't have a graphic, but I'll make sure to mark it in the standings. We'll do a quick around the horn. The line's 3.5 tonight. Obviously, Detroit the home favorite. I said I like Jordan Love. I'm waiting for the Lions secondary to get exposed the way it did in the second half on Thanksgiving, and it happens tonight because Jordan Love slings it. He's not afraid to turn the ball over. He's going to put the ball into risky windows, and that's when the Lions will lose a game, whether it's now or in the postseason. I have the Packers tonight, plus 3.5. I think they win on the road and prove that Green Bay is a top 3 team in football. I really think they are with a win tonight.
It's reassuring to have Luke agree with me on Green Bay. I'm very high on Jordan Love. I'm very high on this defense. I love Jeff Hafley. I love Matt LaFleur. Having Robert Saleh in the building, one of the best defensive minds in the entire league, I think it's great. I think they're trending in the right direction. Love Josh Jacobs and what he's doing. The young receivers coming together. I'm taking Green Bay tonight. I think they justify my sliding of Detroit down the standings a little bit.
Okay, boys, I'm taking the fighting Chris Spielmans. You know that already, without a doubt. Detroit. Here we go.
All right, 2 more games. Seahawks and Cardinals. This is pretty important for the sake of that division with the Niners continuing to lose football games. The Seahawks beat the Cardinals 2 weeks ago in Seattle in the head-to-head. I think it was like the same spread, 2.5 or 3 going the other way for the home team. So the Cardinals now 2.5-point favorites. I'm going to go with Arizona. They look terrible offensively and lost 16-6 the first time around. I actually picked the Seahawks in that game on the show. However, the Seahawks get a big win, comeback win over the Jets. They now travel back home, and they're not ready to play on the road in Arizona this week. I think Kyler has a big statement game inside the division, and they squeak by a field goal.
I'm with you, Luke. I'm taking the Cardinals as well.
There we go.
I love Kyler. I love Arizona. I bet on him as a long shot to make the playoffs earlier this season. So hopefully they can start stringing together some wins and make that come true. But I really like what they're building in Arizona. I think Gannon's a great coach.
You're up, dude. Oh, is he glitched
We might have lost Tom.
Yeah, I'm with Arizona.
He's cutting out.
Am I not there?
There he is.
No, now you're back.
There he is.
Okay. I'm going with Arizona as well, and so I take Arizona. Not on my end.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, it is still a little glitchy, but he's going with the Cardinals. Sunday Night Football, Chargers and Chiefs. This is a really good game inside the AFC. You got to give credit. Harbaugh has really brought Los Angeles to the forefront of the AFC already. I mean, they're right now in the middle of the pack, but if you hold a playoff spot, that's your job as a head coach, is to give your team a chance to win the Super Bowl, and it starts with making the playoffs. I think they cover 4. I really don't like it because I think a lot of people are going to want to ride with the road underdog here and be like, this is a risky pick. I'll take 4. It's a gritty game. The Chiefs only beat people by a field goal. But when push comes to shove, they are physical. And I don't know if the Chiefs can handle that. I think they're going to win the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to run the ball well. They're going to win time of possession. And yes, Patrick Mahomes will probably make a play to win the game down the stretch. But I think the Chargers will be up 7 in that situation, or maybe up 4, and the Chiefs end up winning the game by 3. Chargers cover 4, in my opinion.
I'm taking the Chargers as well. I love what Harbaugh's building there. I love Herbert. I love how physical they are. I don't think that defense is going to get exposed like the Bengals exposed them against the Chiefs. I expect the Chiefs to get a win or to be kind of shut down offensively by this Chargers defense and Herbert kind of have his way. Tom's still struggling on his connection, so I don't want to throw it back to him. I'm not sure what the issue is there, but he did have Kansas City winning this one. So I think that does it for our picks today, Luke.
It does. We can do what could be the move to wrap up. I guess putting a new Wi-Fi router in the Brenneman household would be a good start. Nonetheless, Jacob, what's your weekend move?
Usually my Sundays are full of Chatterbox Bengals streams, but you give me a nice Monday primetime game, I got a Sunday off. I'm gonna get to watch the rest of the league, which is always nice. When you're streaming for the 1 o'clock slate, you miss a lot of games, so these primetime games are nice to get the eyes on the rest of the league. So I'm using the Sunday off to watch football, and I'm excited for it. But Friday and Saturday, conference championships, it's gonna be a lot of couch for me this weekend.
All right, we'll see if we can bring my dad back. I'll go. I love a good Sunday where your dopamine is just going insane as you watch like 20 different games at the same time. I'm sorry that you've had to sacrifice your Sundays to the Bengals defense for the first, 12, 13 weeks of this new football season. My move this weekend, as you do that on Sundays, I typically am covering the Indiana football Hoosiers. So they're off once again, which I'll gladly take. Coming off the big win over Purdue, we're in the college football playoff. It's freezing cold here. It's our final weekend socially before finals, so I'm going to hang out with my friends, and I'm definitely going to be dialed in on Saturday more than Sunday this week. I've loved college football all year. I plan on watching just consecutive championship games in these Power 4 conferences. I think the ACC is one of the last ones on Saturday night, so I'm going to have a heck of a Saturday watching college football, waiting to see who my Hoosiers will play in the college football playoff.
That's big time. Do you think there's a world where they could sneak into having a home game, or is that completely out the window right now?
Yeah, I think it's fully out because, like I mentioned, 5 and 6 probably losers of SEC, Big Ten, and then 7 and 8 and 9 are probably locked in. Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Tennessee in whatever order the committee decides, and at that point, you're not even sniffing hosting a game as the 9 seed either. So they're not going to get the nod over Tennessee. They're certainly not getting the nod over the number 4 overall ranked Notre Dame team, and they lost to Ohio State by what, like 27? So not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think you are probably right. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to get your dad back in here. So if you want to go ahead and wrap it up, we'll call it a day for Dialed In.
All right, sure. I'll try this week. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back Monday. Monday's a big show for us because, like Jacob mentioned, Bengals are on Monday Night Football. I know the season's over, but we are fanatics at the end of the day. We care about the future of this organization, and losing to a Cooper Rush Cowboys team might just be the dagger in the heart. I think they will avoid it. We'll have more. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good weekend. Stay warm, stay safe, and we give you the best from Chatterbox Sports. We'll see you guys. Thanks for tuning in.